The silence in the grand synod of the Xylanthian ascendancy was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a pressurized atmospheric condition engineered to crush the resolve of lesser species. Light filtered through the crystalline dome high above, refracted by the orbital rings of the homeworld, casting long, prismatic bands across the obsidian floor of the chamber. Dust motes, suspended in anti-gravity fields, glittered like frozen stars, motionless and perfect, mirroring the stagnant perfection of the ascendancy itself. High Archon Thalcora sat upon the dais, his elongated fingers steeped together, the bioluminescent patterns on his pale skin pulsing with a slow, rhythmic violet hue that betrayed none of the anxiety gnawing at his primary heart. Below him, the amphitheater was filled with the representatives of the core worlds, a sea of robes and armor, chitin and synthetic weave, all waiting for a pronouncement that felt increasingly impossible to delay. They had gathered to discuss the unthinkable, a subject that had been dismissed with laughter only 50 cycles ago, but was now the source of a terror so profound it threatened to fracture the coalition. They were there to discuss the humans, and the sector of space the ascendancy had laughingly discarded to them, a region known in the stellar charts as the entropy belt, but referred to in the halls of power simply as the junkyard. "The readings are consistent, High Archon," Fleetmaster Vrax rumbled, his voice a grinding tectonic shift that vibrated the sensory tendrils of those nearby. Vrax stood at the center of the floor, a massive, carapace-clad warlord of the Krell, a species bred for conflict. Yet even Vrax, who had glassed moons for minor insurrections, seemed hesitant. He gestured to the massive holographic projection hovering in the center of the chamber. It showed the galactic arm, pristine and orderly in the regions controlled by the ascendancy, but near the edge in the dark expanse of the entropy belt, the data was fractured, chaotic, and blindingly bright. "Our long-range augers cannot penetrate the interference. The gravitational shear alone suggests a mass accumulation that defies standard physics. It is not natural accretion. It is engineering." A murmur rippled through the assembly, a sound like dry leaves skittering over stone. Thalcora watched the hologram, his large, dark eyes narrowing. He remembered the treaty well, the Treaty of Solitude. The humans had arrived on the Galactic stage late, their ships battered, their technology crude, fleeing a dying system. They had petitioned the ascendancy for territory, for a home. The Council, in its infinite arrogance and cruelty, had seen an opportunity to dispose of a liability. The entropy belt was a scar on the galaxy, a graveyard of ancient wars, filled with the shattered hulks of precursor megastructures, unstable red giants, and radiation storms that could strip the shielding off a dreadnought in minutes. It was where the ascendancy towed its radioactive waste, its decommissioned fleets, and its biological hazards. It was a trash heap, and they had given it to the humans with a benevolent smile, calling it a frontier of opportunity, knowing full well it was a tomb. "Engineering," Counselor Lyra of the Ocularis chirped, her multifaceted eyes twitching. "With what resources, Fleetmaster? We gave them nothing. No refined distinctium, no hypercore schematics, no zero-point modules. We gave them twisted metal and poisoned stars. If they are engineering something, it is a coffin. A coffin does not emit energy signatures that dwarf a Class A star," Vrax countered, his tone hardening. He manipulated the hologram, zooming in on the edge of the human zone. The static cleared momentarily, revealing a jagged line of light that seemed to stitch the fabric of space together. "This was taken by a deep recon drone 3 cycles ago before we lost contact. Look at the spectral analysis. That is not fusion. That is not antimatter. It is something cohesive." Thalcora leaned forward, the violet pulse on his skin quickening. The political fallout of this was catastrophic. If the humans had merely died as expected, the ascendancy would have moved on, perhaps eventually reclaiming the sector once the radiation settled in a few millennia. But if they had survived, if they had thrived amidst the garbage, it was an insult to the order of the galaxy. It suggested that the ascendancy's waste was the foundation of a rival power, and that could not be abided. But there was fear, too, a primal fear of the scavenger who finds a blade in the mud and sharpens it while the king sleeps. "They have requested an audience," Thalcora spoke, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the chamber, silencing the murmurs instantly. "A diplomatic vessel has entered the perimeter of the core systems. It is broadcasting standard diplomatic codes, though the encryption is unusually dense. We should vaporize it," Vrax declared, his mandibles clicking. "If they are building weapons in the dark, we do not invite them to the table. We strike before they can deploy whatever abomination they have cobbled together from our refuse. And prove ourselves the barbarians they likely think we are?" Lyra countered, though her voice lacked conviction. If they have technology we do not understand, firing upon an envoy could trigger a response we are ill-equipped to handle. We do not know their fleet strength. We do not know their numbers. We know they are scavengers, Vrax roared, slamming a fist into his palm. They are bottom feeders, they pick through the bones of dead empires. What can they possibly possess that challenges the might of the Ascendancy? Thalcora raised a hand, commanding silence. We will hear them, we will see what the scavengers have become. If they are a threat, we will know it by their demeanor. If they are desperate, we will know it by their plea. But we will not act out of blind ignorance. The Ascendancy is built on knowledge, not reaction. He paused, looking at the chaotic swirl of data on the hologram. Let the human envoy approach, but have the home fleet on high alert. I want target locks on their vessel the moment it drops out of warp. If they twitch, burn them from the sky. The tension in the room did not dissipate. It solidified, becoming a tangible presence as the hours passed. The counselors remained in their seats, whispering, conspiring, watching the tactical displays. When the notification finally came that the human vessel had arrived, the silence returned, heavier than before. The viewscreen on the far wall, a massive pane of suspended liquid crystal, flared to life, showing the orbital approach. They expected a patchwork ship, a vessel welded together from the hulls of destroyed freighters, scarred by radiation and rust. They expected to see the desperation of their existence reflected in their craft. What glided into view silenced even Vrax. It was not a patchwork. It was a seamless tear in the void. The ship was vantablack, absorbing the light of the local star so completely that it appeared as a two-dimensional silhouette against the backdrop of space. It had no visible engines, no thruster ports, no weapons batteries. It moved with an eerie fluidity, shifting its vector without the telltale flare of inertial dampeners. It was a monolith of geometry, a perfect, elongated teardrop that defied the brutalist aesthetics of the Ascendancy's warships. It did not look built, it looked poured. "Scan it," Vrax whispered, his voice losing its thunder. "We are trying, Fleetmaster," a technician replied, panic edging into their voice. "The sensors, they slide off. There is no resistance. It's as if the ship isn't there, yet our optical sensors see it clearly. We are detecting zero emissions, no heat, no radiation. It is a ghost." The ship docked with a high orbital spire, the procedure executed with mechanical precision. Moments later, the transport rings in the center of the Synod chamber hummed. The air shimmered, gold and blue particles dancing as the matter stream solidified. The counselors leaned forward, breaths held, expecting warriors in power armor or ragged survivors in vac suits. The light faded, revealing 3 figures. They wore robes of a material that shifted color with their movement, mimicking the nebular clouds of the deep void. It was not the silk of the Ascendancy. It was something fibrous, dense, yet flowing like water. The central figure was a man of advanced years, his hair the color of steel wool, his face lined with the deep grooves of patience and hardship, yet his eyes were clear, sharp, and terrifyingly calm. He carried no weapon. His hands were clasped loosely behind his back. To his left and right stood 2 younger humans, holding tall staves topped with crystals that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic internal light, the only technology visible on their persons. The central human stepped forward. He did not bow. He did not prostrate himself as lesser species were required to do before the High Archon. He simply looked up at Thalcora, his gaze traversing the distance of the dais with a weight that felt like physical impact. "I am Ambassador Elias Thorn," the human said. His voice was not amplified, yet it carried to the furthest reaches of the hall, projected with a resonance that suggested acoustic enhancement or perfect vocal control. "I represent the United Terran Coalition of the Veiled Marches. We received your summons, though we have been content in our solitude." Thalcora bristled at the lack of deference, but maintained his composure. "Ambassador Thorn, you stand before the Grand Synod of the Ascendancy. You occupy territory granted to you by our benevolence 50 cycles ago. We have summoned you because there are irregularities emanating from your sector, readings that concern the peace of the galaxy." Thorn's expression did not change. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Irregularities? We call it industry, High Archon. We have been busy. The gift you gave us was generous. We did not wish to squander it." "Generous?" Lyra scoffed, her voice shrill. "We gave you a graveyard, a dump. Do not mock us with false gratitude, human. We know what the entropy belt is." Thorn turned his gaze to Lyra, and for a moment the Ocularis counselor flinched, feeling a sudden chill. "To you, perhaps it was a graveyard," Thorn said softly. "To us, it was a library, it was a mine, it was a test. You looked at the broken hulls of the precursor fleets and saw garbage. We looked at them and saw raw materials, exotic alloys, and half-depleted singularities. You looked at the radiation storms and saw death. We saw energy waiting to be harnessed. We are a pragmatic people, counselor. We do not believe in waste." You speak of harnessing singularities as if you were lighting a campfire, Vrax growled, stepping down from his podium to tower over the humans. You are a young species. You were barely capable of warp travel when you begged for sanctuary. Do not pretend you have mastered the dark sciences in 50 cycles. Necessity is the most efficient teacher, Fleetmaster, Thorn replied, meeting the giant's gaze without blinking. When you are tossed into the cold, you learn to build a fire with whatever you find. Or you freeze, we chose not to freeze. Thalcora leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Enough riddles. Your sector is emitting energy signatures that threaten the stability of the hyperspace lanes. We demand access to inspect your facilities. We demand to know what you have built in the dark. If it is a weapon, you will dismantle it. If it is a violation of the Treaty of Solitude, you will be sanctioned. Thorn looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the hundreds of alien delegates. He seemed to be measuring them, weighing their fear against their arrogance. It is not a weapon, High Archon, at least not in the way you understand the word, and as for inspection, we anticipated your curiosity. In fact, we invite it. We have prepared a demonstration. It is difficult to explain what we have achieved with words. The scale requires proximity. You want us to enter your territory? Vrax sneered. A trap. If we wish to harm you, Fleetmaster, Thorn said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming suddenly, terrifyingly devoid of emotion, we would not need to lure you anywhere. We could have ended this conversation before your sensors registered our arrival. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not a threat delivered with rage. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the casual assurance of someone who knows the gun is loaded and the safety is off. Thalcora felt a shiver run down his spine. He looked at the readings from the docked human ship. Still 0 emissions, still a ghost. He realized then that the Ascendancy had made a grave error. They had assumed the humans were rotting. Instead, they had been fermenting. I will accompany you, Thalcora announced, standing up. The room erupted in protest, but he silenced them with a raised hand. I will go, and Fleetmaster Vrax will accompany me. We will take the flagship Asterisk Purity of Will Asterisk. If this is a trap, the fleet will incinerate the sector. If it is a revelation, I wish to see it with my own eyes. Thorn bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect that felt more like a concession to a child. Excellent. Our vessel will lead the way. Prepare your minds, High Archon. The marches are not as you remember them. The journey to the edge of the entropy belt was tense. The Asterisk Purity of Will Asterisk, a leviathan of white ceramic and gold filigree, the pride of the Ascendancy fleet, moved through hyperspace flanked by 20 battle cruisers. On the bridge, Thalcora stood watching the main view screen where the small, black human ship stayed steadily ahead of them, effortlessly matching their maximum cruise velocity. They are holding back, Vrax muttered, studying the telemetry. Their drive signature is wrong. There is no wake. They are not pushing against space, they are slipping through it. It is efficient to the point of absurdity. We are approaching the transition point, the navigator called out. Dropping to real space in 5, 4, 3, the stars stretched and snapped back into points of light. The fleet emerged at the border of the entropy belt, or at least where the border used to be. Thalcora gasped. Vrax froze. On the bridge, officers stood up from their stations, staring at the view screen in disbelief. 50 cycles ago, this region had been a swirling soup of brown dwarfs, ionic gas clouds, and debris fields that clogged the sensors. It had been ugly, chaotic, and dangerous. Now it was a garden of geometry. The chaotic nebulae had been sculpted. The gases were no longer shapeless clouds, but were channeled into massive, glowing Vers of plasma that spanned light years, flowing in perfect mathematical spirals. The debris fields, the billions of tons of shattered warships and ruined stations, were gone. In their place hung vast lattices, glittering silver webs that connected star to star. But it was the stars themselves that stopped the hearts of the Ascendancy crew. The unstable red giants and variable stars that had made the sector uninhabitable were caged. Encased in Dyson swarms of such density and complexity that they looked like polished gemstones. The erratic radiation was being siphoned, filtered, and directed into the plasma rivers, feeding a central point far in the distance. By the void, Thalcora whispered. They didn't just survive, they terraformed the stellar geography. This is impossible, Vrax breathed. The resources required the raw mass. We used the garbage, Thorn's voice came over the comms, crisp and clear. Every hull you discarded, every leaking reactor core. We broke them down to the molecular level. We utilized the nanite swarms found in the precursor wreckage, technology you outlawed as cursed, and reprogrammed them for construction. We did not mine planets, High Archon. We mined the mistakes of the past. Continue to the coordinates sent, Thorn instructed. You must see the forge. The fleet moved deeper into the sector. They passed habitat stations that were clearly grown rather than built, organic metal fused with crystalline structures. housing millions of humans. The ships patrolling the sector were not the blocky, aggressive shapes of the Ascendancy, but sleek, needle-like vessels that danced in formation. They ignored the massive Ascendancy battle cruisers, treating them with the indifference of a whale ignoring minnows. As they approached the center of the sector, the light grew intense. The plasma rivers all converged on a single location, a binary star system that had once been a violently unstable contact binary, destined to go nova. Now, the two stars were held in a gravitational vice. Between them sat a structure of such magnitude that the human mind struggled to comprehend it. It was a ring, but a ring the size of a planetary orbit, spinning at relativistic speeds. The plasma rivers fed into it, and from the center of the ring, a beam of pure, coherent light shot upwards, perpendicular to the galactic plane, disappearing into the infinite void above the galaxy. "What is that?" Thalcora asked, his voice shaking. "Is it a weapon, a cannon?" "It is the forge," Thorn replied. The image of the human ambassador appeared on the main screen of the bridge. He was standing on the bridge of his own ship, the backdrop showing the massive ring. "You asked what we built." "We built a solution to entropy." "Explain," Vrax demanded, though his aggression was replaced by a bewildered awe. "The device stabilizes the binary stars," Thorn said calmly. "It siphons their excess fury and converts it into binding energy. We are using it to manufacture matter from light. We are printing stable, heavy elements, exotic matter, and stabilized collapsed matter plating. We do not need to conquer worlds for resources, Fleetmaster. We create them. The garbage you threw at us provided the initial mass to build the scaffolding. Now the stars themselves provide the labor." Thalcora sank into his command chair. The economic implications alone were enough to topple the Ascendancy. The humans had post-scarcity technology. They had bypassed the fundamental struggle of biological life, the struggle for resources. While the Ascendancy fought wars over mining rights and trade routes, the humans had simply stepped out of the game. "But why the beam?" Thalcora asked, pointing to the pillar of light shooting into the void. "If it is a factory, why are you venting such power into deep space? That beam, the energy yield is terrifying. If you aimed that at a planet—" "We do not aim it at planets," Thorn said, his face growing solemn. "And this brings us to the reason we allowed you here, the reason we did not hide." The screen shifted, showing a star map. It zoomed out, leaving the galaxy, moving into the intergalactic void. "We scavenged the precursor wrecks in this sector," Thorn began, his voice taking on a heavy storytelling cadence. "We found more than just metal and tech. We found logs, data crystals that had survived for 1,000,000 years. We learned why this sector was a graveyard. We learned why the precursors died." The room fell silent. The precursors were a myth to the Ascendancy, a vanished race that left behind only ruins. "They didn't die of plague or civil war," Thorn continued. "They were hunted. There is something in the dark, high archon, something that sleeps in the void between galaxies, waking only when it detects the energy signature of a civilization reaching a certain threshold. The precursors called them the harvesters, the silence, the great filter. A chill that had nothing to do with the vac. Of space settled over the bridge crew. "The precursors fought them here in this sector," Thorn said. "They gathered their last great fleets, their wildest weapons, and they lost. The debris you tossed at us, that was the corpse of the galaxy's last defense." "And you rebuilt it," Thalcora whispered. "No," Thorn said. "We improved it. The precursors tried to fight the harvesters with fire and kinetics. They tried to outshoot them, but you cannot kill a swarm that spans the dark. You have to deny them the path." Thorn gestured to the beam on the screen. "The forge is not just a factory. It is a dimensional anchor. That beam is piercing the fabric of subspace, creating a localized region of reinforced reality. We are building a wall high archon, a shield not of energy, but of physics. We are locking the door to this galaxy so they cannot get in again." Vrax stared at the screen, his mind reeling. You are protecting us." "We are protecting ourselves," Thorn corrected gently. "You just happen to live in the same house. We realized 50 cycles ago that if we stayed quiet, if we just survived, eventually the Ascendancy would expand, the energy noise of the galaxy would rise, and they would return. We needed to be ready. We needed materials. We needed time. And you gave us both. You gave us the wreckage to study their weaknesses, and you gave us the solitude to build the countermeasure without interference." "You let us think you were weak," Thalcora said, a mix of shame and admiration rising in his chest. "You let us mock you. Pride is a luxury we could not afford," Thorn said, "and silence was our only defense until today." "Why today?" Vrax asked. "Why reveal this now?" Thorn looked down, and for the first time he looked tired. "Because the beam is working, but the friction caused by sealing the breach," it rang a bell. "They know we are here now. The harvesters are waking up. The first waves will not be the main fleet. They will be scouts, probes, things that can slip through the cracks before the wall is fully hardened." The human leaned closer to the camera. We have the shield High Archon, but we cannot hold the line alone. The forge requires immense focus to maintain. We cannot fight a war on the ground and hold the sky at the same time. We forged the superweapon to save the galaxy, but we need you to be the sword while we are the shield. Thalcora looked at the massive ring, the caged stars, the brilliance of human ingenuity born from the scrap heap of the Ascendancy's arrogance. He realized the hierarchy of the galaxy had shifted irrevocably. The humans were not subjects, they were the architects of the future. The Ascendancy had spent millennia perfecting the art of governance and war, but they had been playing in a sandbox while the humans were fortifying the castle. You ask for an alliance, Thalcora stated, between the Ascendancy and the Coalition. I ask for unity, Thorn corrected. The garbage you threw away has become the fortress that will save your lives. We do not ask for your distinctium or your territory. We ask for your fleets. We ask you to stand guard while we finish the work. The bridge was silent. Vrax looked at his High Archon. The warrior's eyes were wide, the lust for conquest replaced by the sobering weight of duty. He nodded slowly. Thalcora turned back to the screen. He straightened his robes, the violet pulsing of his skin calming to a steady, resolute blue. He bowed. It was a deep bow, one usually reserved for the gods or the ancestors. The Ascendancy accepts, Thalcora said, his voice echoing with a new purpose. We thought we discarded you. Instead, we planted a seed we did not understand. We will mobilize the fleets. We will hold the line. Thorn nodded, a look of profound relief washing over his features. Then let us begin. The sensors indicate the first breach will occur in the Perseus arm in 3 days. We will send you the coordinates. Bring everything, High Archon. Bring the garbage scows if you have to. In this war, nothing is wasted. The transmission ended. The view of the forge remained, a burning halo against the dark, a testament to the terrifying resilience of humanity. Thalcora looked out at the structure, then at Vrax. We tossed them our garbage, Thalcora murmured, the irony tasting like ash and hope in his mouth. And they built a god, Vrax finished. Let us hope it is on our side. It is, Thalcora said, turning to his crew. Because they are human, they do not throw things away, not even us. The orders went out. The Ascendancy mobilized. For the first time in history, the galaxy did not march to war against itself. It marched to the beat of a silent drum, forged in the dark, guarding the light against the encroaching night. The transition from diplomatic revelation to the reality of cosmic defense was not immediate, nor was it smooth. The shock that propagated through the Ascendancy was cultural and detheological. For thousands of cycles, the Xylanth and their subject species had believed themselves the apex of civilization. They were the gardeners of the galaxy, pruning the weeds, deciding which species bloomed and which withered. To learn that the weeds had built a fortress in the compost heap was a humiliation that many in the core worlds could not swallow, but fear is a potent unifier. Thalcora remained in the veiled marches, establishing a forward command post aboard the Asterisk Purity of Will Asterisk. He spent his days in the observation deck, watching the human worker drones, unmanned autonomous swarms, continuing the expansion of the Dyson lattice. It was hypnotic. The humans didn't build with rivets and beams, they built with fields and matter printing. He watched as a derelict moon, towed from a neighboring system, was dismantled by a shimmering cloud of nanites. In hours, the moon was gone, replaced by a fresh squadron of defensive satellites and a new strut for the forge. It is efficient, Thalcora noted to Ambassador Thorn, who had joined him on the observation deck. The human diplomat seemed to be a permanent fixture now, acting as the liaison between the Ascendancy Military Command and the Human Engineering Corps. Entropy is the enemy, Thorn replied, sipping a heated beverage from a simple metal flask. Waste is a sin. That is the core of our philosophy now. When we arrived here, we had ships that were leaking air. We had rations for 6 months. We had to decide, do we die with dignity or do we survive by changing who we are? We realized that everything has value if you have the energy to transform it. The garbage became our gold. And the ethics? Thalcora asked. You use nanites. You manipulate stellar masses. These are forbidden technologies in the Ascendancy because they risk destabilizing the fabric of reality. Risk is relative, Thorn said, looking out at the forge. The risk of doing nothing was extinction. We calculated the variables. We established protocols. We didn't just unleash the tech, we domesticated it. Humans have a history of playing with fire. Sometimes we get burned. Sometimes we build steam engines. This time we built a star cage. The conversation was interrupted by the blaring of klaxons. The lighting on the deck shifted to a harsh crimson. Contact. Vrax's voice boomed over the comms. Sector 7 near the edge of the hardened zone. Subspace rupture detected. It matches the signatures provided by the humans. It begins, Thorn said, capping his flask. His calmness evaporated, replaced by a sharp military focus. The first wave. Thalcora rushed to the tactical display. The sensor grid, integrated now with human telemetry, showed a tear in spacetime. It wasn't a warped tunnel, it was a bruise on reality. From the tear, shapes were emerging. They were not ships. They were biological monstrosities, vast leviathans of chitin and shadow swimming through the vacuum as if it were an ocean. They pulsed with a necrotic green light, and where they passed, the stars seemed to dim. "The Voidborn," Thorn whispered. "Scouts, they are testing the perimeter." "Fleetmaster Vrax," Thalcora ordered. "Engage, show them the might of the Ascendancy." "With pleasure," Vrax replied. The space battle that followed was a spectacle of divergent philosophies. The Ascendancy fleet fought with elegance and overwhelming firepower. Lances of plasma and antimatter torpedoes streaked through the dark, slamming into the Voidborn leviathans. The enemy was resilient. Their hides absorbed energy, and they retaliated with gravity waves that crushed shields and buckled hulls. But the humans fought differently. From the Dyson lattice, the defensive platforms activated. They didn't fire lasers. They manipulated the environment. Gravity wells spiked, freezing the Voidborn in place. Localized pockets of time dilation slowed the enemy down, making them easy targets for Vrax's gunners. The garbage sector itself turned against the invaders. Asteroids that looked inert suddenly altered course, guided by magnetic tethers, smashing into the creatures with kinetic force that cracked their shells. "They are fighting with the terrain," Vrax noted, his voice filled with begrudging respect as he watched a human drone swarm disassemble a wounded Voidborn creature while it was still alive, stripping it for resources in real time. "They are harvesting the enemy. We do not waste," Thorn reminded them from the command deck. "That biomass is rich in carbon and silicates. It will be used to repair the ships that destroy it." The skirmish lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the debris of the Voidborn was already being towed toward the forge. The Ascendancy had lost 3 cruisers. The humans had lost 0 ships, though several drones were destroyed. In the aftermath, a somber mood settled over the Allied command. The victory was decisive, but the data retrieved from the encounter was chilling. These were drones. A human scientist explained in the strategy room later that cycle. She was young, with cybernetic implants around her eyes. Biological automata, no higher brain functions. They were sent to map the resistance. The main intelligence, the harvesters, they are still coming, and they will adapt. "How long?" Thalcora asked. "Based on the signal propagation, 6 months," the scientist replied. 6 months until the main breach. The forge needs to be at 100% output to seal the galaxy by then. Currently, we are at 84%. "We need more power," Thorn said. "The binary stars are reaching peak extraction. If we push them harder, we risk a collapse." "Then we need more mass," Vrax grunted. "More fuel for the reaction." Thorn looked at the Ascendancy officers. "We have scavenged everything in this sector. The nebula is drained. The debris fields are clear. To reach 100%, we need raw material on a planetary scale. We need a gas giant or a dead star." Thalcora went silent. The logistics of moving a planet were theoretical at best for the Ascendancy. "We can move it," Thorn said, anticipating the doubt. "We have the gravity tugs, but we don't have a target nearby. The nearest uninhabited system with suitable mass is in Ascendancy space. The Ocularis system has a brown dwarf on its periphery." "That is Counselor Lyra's home system," Thalcora noted. "To strip mine a star in a core system, the political ramifications are irrelevant if we are all dead," Vrax snapped. "We take the star." Thalcora looked at the humans. They were ready to do the impossible, but they stopped at theft. They respected the sovereignty of the Ascendancy even now. "I will authorize it," Thalcora said, "but we must be fast if the harvesters arrive before the wall is up." "They won't," Thorn said. "Because we are going to bait them." The plan that formed over the next few weeks was a testament to the synthesis of Xylanthian strategy and human madness. The Ascendancy would form a blockade at the breach point, a wall of ships to hold the line. Meanwhile, the humans would use their gravity tethers to drag a brown dwarf star through a wormhole, a feat of engineering that defied sanity, to feed the forge. But the bait, that was the terrifying part. "We need to draw their main force into a kill box," Thorn explained. "We are going to lower the shields around the forge momentarily. We will broadcast a signal that suggests the weapon is malfunctioning. They will swarm it, trying to destroy the threat at the source. Once they are in the gravity well of the binary stars, we turn the forge back on, not as a shield, but as a furnace." "You will incinerate the entire invasion fleet?" Vrax asked. "We will recycle them," Thorn corrected. The 6 months passed in a blur of frantic activity. The galaxy watched as the garbage people and the High Lords worked side by side. Xylanthian engineers marveled at human intuitive coding. Human laborers rode on the hulls of Krell dreadnoughts, welding armor plates. The cultural barriers didn't just break, They evaporated under the heat of necessity. The day of the arrival came. The breach tore open, not a small tear this time, but a wound that spanned an entire solar system. The sky turned black with the swarm. The Voidborn poured in billions of bioships, from fighter-sized parasites to world-eating motherships. The Ascendancy fleet opened fire. It was a wall of light, a desperate, blinding barrage. Thalcora stood on the bridge of the asterisk purity of Will Asterisk, watching the tide of darkness crash against his shields. "Hold the line," he screamed into the comms. "Buy them time." The battle was catastrophic. Ships burned. Lives were extinguished by the millions, but they held. They forced the swarm to bunch up, to push toward the one energy source that screamed out to them, the forge. "They are taking the bait," Vrax roared, his face covered in green blood from a console explosion. "They are moving toward the marches." "Thorn," Thalcora yelled, "now, do it now." In the veiled marches, the human fleet pulled back. The brown dwarf star, dragged across light years, was fed into the accretion disk of the binary system. Structure groaned, the metal screeching across the electromagnetic spectrum. The Voidborn swarm engulfed the forge. They covered the Dyson rings like locusts. They thought they had won. They sensed the vulnerability. On the command deck of the human control station, Ambassador Thorn watched the tactical map. The enemy was fully committed. "Activate the Singularity Forge," Thorn ordered quietly. "Maximum throughput. Initiate the matter-energy inversion." The binary stars didn't just flare, they screamed. The forge reversed its polarity. Instead of drawing energy out, it pushed the binding energy of the brown dwarf into the surrounding space. It wasn't an explosion. It was a rewrite of local physics. The gravity well expanded instantly to encompass the entire Voidborn fleet. Then it compressed. From the viewpoint of the Ascendancy fleet, light years away, it looked like the universe blinked. A sphere of absolute darkness appeared, then collapsed into a blinding point of white light. When the light faded, the Voidborn were gone, not destroyed, unmade asterisk. Their matter had been stripped, broken down into subatomic soup, and fed into the forge's storage capacitors. The breach in the universe began to close. The beam from the forge shot up once more, brighter than ever, fueled by the mass of 1 billion enemy ships. It hit the tier in reality and cauterized it. The wall hardened, the signal from the dark ceased. Silence returned to the galaxy. Thalcora stared at the screen. The veiled marches were still there. The forge was glowing with a steady, golden light. The humans had not only won, they had profited. "Status report," Thalcora whispered. "The breach is sealed," the comms officer reported, voice trembling. "The human fleet signals all clear. They report energy reserves are at 120% capacity. They are asking if we require assistance with our repairs." Thalcora laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound, but it was genuine. He looked at Vrax, who was slumped in his chair, exhausted but alive. "They tossed us their garbage," Thalcora said, echoing the words he had spoken months ago. "And we forged a friendship." The aftermath of the War of the Forge changed the galaxy forever. The Treaty of Solitude was burned. A new treaty was signed, the Accord of the Dual Stars. The Ascendancy remained the political center, but the veiled marches became the industrial heart of the civilization. The humans did not seek to rule. They remained in their sector, obsessively optimizing, building, and watching the wall. They shared their medical tech, their energy solutions, and their philosophy. Thalcora, now an old man near the end of his long life, traveled one last time to the forge. He stood with Elias Thorn, who had also aged, his hair now white as the starlight. They stood on a viewing platform overlooking the binary stars, now calm and stable, encircled by the most beautiful machine ever built. "You saved us," Thalcora said. "You saved everything, and you asked for no crown." "We are scavengers, High Archon," Thorn said, smiling. "We are happy just to find a use for things. We found a use for the stars, we found a use for the enemy, and we found a use for the Ascendancy." "And what was that?" Thalcora asked. "You gave us a reason to build it," Thorn said. "Without the fear of you, we might have stayed content on Earth. You pushed us into the trash can. It forced us to climb out." Thalcora looked at the beam of light, the eternal shield guarding the galaxy from the horrors of the dark. "We will never underestimate you again," Thalcora promised. "Good," Thorn said. "Because the garbage we found in the precursor logs, it mentioned a second wave, stronger than the first." Thalcora froze. Thorn chuckled, patting the Archon on the shoulder. "Relax, old friend. Look at the readings. We have enough energy stored now to build a second forge. Let them come. We'll just need more trash to recycle." And in that moment, the High Archon of the Xylanthian Ascendancy realized that the humans were not just survivors. They were the galaxy's immune system. And for the first time in his life, he looked at the infinite, terrifying dark of the universe and did not feel fear. He felt only the quiet, efficient hum of a superweapon built from garbage, waiting to turn nightmares into stardust.